Imagine trying to fight off, like a sophisticated military-grade cyber attack. The alarms are blaring, the automated defenses are spinning up, and right at the critical moment, your entire operational command just crashes.
Right, and it doesn't crash because of a brilliant piece of malware or anything like
And
that?
exactly, not malware. It crashes because your lead architect is utterly exhausted from spending, I don't know, the last 4 hours filling out a 15-page HR medical leave form.
Yeah, which is just a brutal reality for a lot of people in this field.
It really is. So, welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we are bringing you, the listener, into something incredibly exclusive. We've got our hands on a highly classified, internal, after-action review document, an AAR.
And this AAR is just fascinating because it is completely reframing how we think about enterprise architecture
Yeah.
and really the human toll of running it.
Yeah.
This document details a radical 14-day period that the authors literally call a warp in evolution.
Right. The mission of this deep dive is to unpack exactly how this enterprise transitioned from being a manual reactive setup, which they call the T1 Hobbyist era, into a fully autonomous, mathematically governed T2 epistemically agentic enterprise.
It's a mouthful, but the concepts are incredible.
Okay, let's unpack this. What does it actually mean to stop being a T1 hobbyist?
Well, to understand the shift, you have to look at the daily reality of most IT or security professionals.
Yeah.
Usually you are operating, in the system.
Like a manual administrator.
Exactly. You are fixing broken servers, manually chasing security alerts, applying patches one by one, and the organization realized that this creates an insurmountable level of technical toil.
It's a trap, basically.
A huge trap. You're so busy keeping the lights on that you can never actually design a better building. So the goal of this 14-day warp was to escape that completely, to elevate operational command to like a CEO vantage point where the system essentially runs itself.
Because if you're constantly under the hood changing the oil, you're never actually driving the car.
Right, exactly.
And to stop working in the system and start working on it, you have to adopt a totally different mindset. The AAR mentions they move to a proactive, militarized doctrine known as C4ISR.
Yeah, command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
But they did this with a very specific mathematical goal in mind: the absolute elimination of something called infrastructure debt.
Yes, infrastructure debt, which they represent as the variable ID. This is the core metric that drives literally everything in the new T2 enterprise.
Wait, they actually found a way to mathematically quantify a messy system. Because when I hear infrastructure debt, I instantly think of a messy garage.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Like every unsorted wrench or random box of screws is an unaligned asset. And because you can't find the 10mm socket when you actually need it, it takes you 5 times longer to fix your car. It creates this massive cognitive drag. But how do you put a hard number on the frustration of not finding a wrench?
Well, they literally quantify that messy garage. So the math for infrastructure debt is ID equals UA over AT.
Unaligned assets divided by total assets.
Exactly. If that fraction yields a number greater than 0, your system is mathematically in decay. You have wrenches lying on the floor instead of on the pegboard.
Wow.
And to restore health, they don't just organize the garage manually, they enforce a strict mathematical boundary called the force index baseline.
Okay, I want to understand this. How does the force index actually work?
Think of the force index as a formula that calculates whether a human operator even has the physical energy to succeed. The formula is E equals RA divided by C plus F.
Okay, so E is system efficiency.
Right. System efficiency equals resource allocation, the RA, which is basically the human operator's available metabolic and mental energy.
Got it.
And you divide that available energy by the sum of cognitive load, your C, plus manual friction, your F.
Oh, wow. So on the top of the fraction, you have my actual human energy to clean the garage. But on the bottom, dividing and eating away at my energy is the cognitive load. Trying to remember where I left the toolbox plus the manual friction.
Yeah, the physical digging through boxes of junk to find it.
Right. And if that bottom number gets too heavy, the bottom of the fraction explodes and your system efficiency flatlines to 0.
Precisely. You are mathematically paralyzed by your own environment. So the enterprise realized that to survive, they had to reduce C and F to 0.
And how did they do that?
To do that, they deployed an AI directorate. And we need to be really clear, this isn't like a customer service chatbot.
Definitely not.
No, this is an autonomous, heavily armed governance board designed to manage the wisdom internalization externalization loop, or the WIE loop.
The WIE loop. So this AI board of directors basically takes over the garage. And this board is made up of specific AI personas. Let's break these down because they are fascinating. First up, the AI mentions the intelligence director.
Yes, operating at the highest mandate levels, P0 and P2. This persona acts as the primary synapse for the entire enterprise.
Like the brain.
Right. It ingests raw signals from the outside world, threats, news, data, and it applies a strict truth test. It doesn't just passively read data, it interrogates it to see if it aligns with the enterprise's established reality before any other system is even allowed to process it.
So it's the ultimate gatekeeper. Then we have the quartermaster operating at P1 and P3.
The quartermaster is essentially the chief financial officer of computing power and resources. It strictly enforces resource escrows.
So it looks at the force index baseline we just discussed and mathematically authorizes operations.
Exactly.
So if a system update or a new project costs too much friction, like if it spikes the C or the F in our equation, the quartermaster just vetoes it. It kills the operation to protect the human's energy budget.
That's exactly it. It prevents the enterprise from taking on tasks that will bankrupt its efficiency. Then third, you have the sovereign shield at P4 and P6.
And what does that do?
Think of this as the enterprise's immune system combined with, like, a Supreme Court. It monitors the entire software development lifecycle. If an engineer tries to build a tool that violates core enterprise mandates, the sovereign shield just stops it from ever being deployed.
It's quality control with actual teeth.
Big teeth.
And finally, the tactical commander at P5.
Yeah, this is the persona that governs execution and what the AAR explicitly calls lethal efficiency.
Lethal efficiency? That sounds intense.
It is. It only discharges energy for a kinetic strike, like a major system deployment, a complete network isolation, or a defensive maneuver after clearing a massive automated go-no-go checklist. It takes the human completely out of the trigger-pulling process.
So we have these ruthless AI foremen governing the logic of the enterprise, but an AI is just code, right? It needs a physical digital environment to exert this control. How do they actually rebuild the digital floors and walls to support this board of directors? Because the AAR talks about a transition to a protocol-first architecture.
Well, they had to completely strip away the past. They got rid of ad hoc scripts, legacy servers, and those fragmented Web 2.5 platforms.
Just threw them out.
Pretty much. Instead, they built an incredibly strict T1.2 enterprise architecture schema. It's their single source of truth, the SOT. And it's beautifully simple on the surface. Everything is divided into 4 clean directories.
/gov for governance, /prod for production, /data for storage, and /brain for the AI models.
Exactly. But those aren't just folders on a desktop.
Right.
That directory structure is the foundation of a physical 4-tiered operational mesh. The AI directorate physically operates across these 4 environments to execute the enterprise's will.
Instead of just listing the tiers, can we walk through them? Because I really want to understand the how here.
So,
let's trace a piece of data. Say a sophisticated cyber threat hits the absolute edge of the company's network. What happened?
okay, let's trace it. That threat first hits Tier 4, which is Citadel Sentinel. This is the military-grade edge defense. It operates right on the perimeter with absolute zero-trust protocols.
So it doesn't wait for permission?
No, Citadel Sentinel doesn't ask human what to do. It instantly mitigates the live threat. But it doesn't just drop the data. It packages the telemetry of that attack and sends it up to Tier 3.
Okay, so Tier 3 is Cyber Sentinel 36.
Right. Cyber Sentinel 36 operates natively on the cloud. It acts as a data diode and a translation engine. It takes the raw, chaotic attack data from Tier 4, scrubs it of any sensitive internal markers, and translates it into a standardized format.
Makes it readable.
Exactly. Then it pushes that clean data up to Tier 2.
And Tier 2 is Praxisparity. The AAR calls this the Center for Applied Cyber Epistemology and Emulation, or ACE. What happens there?
This is where theory turns into practice. Praxisparity takes that scrubbed attack data and runs massive simulations and cyber-physical attack emulations.
So it's testing the attack against itself?
Yes, it wants to know why the attack happened and how it might evolve. It generates a strategic intelligence report based on the emulation. Finally, that report is sent to the absolute core, Tier 1.
Axiom Sentinel, the Enterprise Command Hub.
Exactly. Axiom Sentinel is the architecture of authority, where the /gov policy is actually set. The AI board of directors sits here, reviews the intelligence from Tier 2, and automatically adjusts the global policy of the entire enterprise.
So that specific threat can never penetrate Tier 4 again.
Precisely. And the human operator never had to touch a single server.
That is a phenomenal system. And here's where it gets really interesting for me, because when we talk about threat mitigation and gathering intelligence, we're talking about OSINT, right? Open source intelligence.
Right.
Usually, processing an ocean of OSINT takes human analysts weeks. They are scrolling, verifying sources, cross-referencing data points. But this AR stakes, they reduced OSINT processing from weeks to literally minutes using something called the Signal Refutation Engine, or the SRE. How is that functionally possible?
This is perhaps the most brilliant philosophical and technical application in the entire transition.
Yeah.
To process intelligence that fast, the SRE relies on mismatch logic.
Mismatch logic.
Yes, represented mathematically as not MM, and it utilizes Popperian falsification.
Okay, Karl Popper, the 20th century philosopher of science. How does a philosopher help an AI process threat data faster?
By completely changing the goal of the AI. In the modern era of data abundance, adversaries use bots and AI to flood the zone with fake data, deepfakes, false narratives.
Right, data poisoning.
Exactly. If you build an AI and tell it to mathematically verify every single piece of that ocean of data to find the truth, the AI will fail. It requires too much compute, it's way too slow.
Because there's just too much of it.
Right. But Toil Popper argued that you can never truly prove a theory is true because you can't observe everything in the universe. But you only need one single contradictory fact to prove a theory false.
Oh, I see. It's like a bouncer at a high-end club.
Okay, go on.
If you hand the bouncer your ID, instead of running a full background check on your life story, calling your high school, verifying your home address, and checking your credit score to prove you are who you say you are, they just shine a black light on the ID to see if the state hologram is missing.
That is exactly it.
One mismatch, one missing hologram, and you're out. The SRE isn't looking for the truth, it's hunting for the one lie.
Spot on. The AI actively searches the OSINT data for a single refuting contradiction. The moment it finds a logical mismatch against known physical reality or established enterprise architecture, it instantly collapses the entire fabricated threat narrative.
Wow.
It throws it out before it ever reaches a human analyst's desk. Weeks of exhausting human verification become milliseconds of automated falsification.
That is just incredibly satisfying to think about. A machine designed to instantly shatter false realities. And speaking of satisfying, the AAR spends a good amount of time celebrating the wins from this 14-day sprint. Because this wasn't just theory on a whiteboard, they successfully physicalized this entire mesh and their tradecraft engines.
Yes, the architecture is completely live. And one of the most satisfying wins highlighted in the document is the trapping of syntax faults.
Which sounds minor, but it's not.
It sounds small to an outsider, but it is massive for systemic health. They deployed an automated tool called the intravenous router. This tool successfully monitored the enterprise, and the moment a user or a script tried to save a file or create a resource with the wrong naming convention, it instantly applied a syntax fault flag and enforced the correct rule.
Meaning the messy garage can literally never get messy again. If someone drops a wrench, the system immediately flags it and puts it back on the correct pegboard automatically.
Exactly. It proves that their consequence-driven defense and zero-trust automation are functioning flawlessly at the absolute lowest levels of the architecture.
They also highlight a massive win regarding their transition to that protocol-first architecture. They completely bypassed legacy DNS registries and anchored the entire ecosystem to a Web3 cryptographic identity.
Yes, Axiom Sentinel.f.
Right. Why go through the trouble of doing that?
Because it creates an undeniable foundation of trust. Using a traditional DNS registry or a standard digital signature is fine, but they can be spoofed or compromised. Anchoring to a Web3 identity creates what they call a non-reputable digital pedigree.
It's like using a unique cryptographic wax seal on a royal decree instead of just signing a piece of paper. You bypass the easily forged legacy systems and create a mathematically undeniable proof of exactly who issued the intelligence.
Precisely. When your entire enterprise's output is sealed to that Web3 identity, no one can spoof your intelligence reports. It guarantees absolute authority. But more importantly, it paves the way for what the AAR calls Web3 sovereign capital generation.
So they aren't just doing IT for the sake of IT anymore.
No, not at all.
Right. They are mathematically converting threat intelligence into monetized, decentralized assets. If the Citadel Sentinel spots a threat, the SRE sanitizes it, the translation engine packages it, and they can literally mint that unique intelligence as a digital asset for other executives or enterprises to consume. It becomes a self-funding intelligence agency.
It is the ultimate realization of working on the system instead of in it. The system generates its own value.
But let's do a reality check here, because reading this AAR, the tone shifts dramatically when we get to the fiction section.
Yeah, I think it does.
Despite the autonomous AI, the military-grade edge defense, and the brilliant falsification architecture, the document outlines some massive strategic friction. And I have to push back on the whole premise here. If the AI board of directors is doing all the heavy lifting and the system is running itself, why is the AAR explicitly stating that the human operator is still struggling with severe cognitive load?
Well, because fundamentally we cannot escape biology, and we cannot escape human bureaucracy. The AAR introduces a really harsh concept called the mesh tax. Running a massive automated infrastructure, even one governed by AI, requires a high metabolic cost from the operator who is architecting it.
The human metabolic cost.
Yes. The AAR explicitly acknowledges the brutal friction caused by what it calls legacy biological and environmental maintenance.
Meaning the human still has to eat, sleep, and maintain a physical living space.
Right. But more aggressively, the document calls out necessary GRC tasks.
Governance, risk, and compliance.
Exactly.
Wait, let's unpack that, because the AAR specifically mentions the crushing burden of FMLA and Sedgwick paperwork. We are talking about third-party HR and medical compliance forms.
I know, it's wild.
We are looking at a T2 epistemically agentic enterprise calculating lethal cyber efficiency in milliseconds. And the human operator, the architect of this perfect machine, is getting brought to their knees because they have to fax a doctor's note to an insurance auditor.
That is the dark, unavoidable irony of the modern enterprise. And it ties directly back to the force index math we discussed at the very beginning. Remember the formula? E equals RA divided by C plus F.
Efficiency equals the operator's energy divided by cognitive load plus manual friction.
Right. And the mathematical efficiency of the system does not care what is causing the friction.
Oh, I see it now.
When cognitive load and friction spike because the human architect is bogged down, filling out 15 pages of legacy Sedgwick medical compliance forms, the efficiency of the entire cyber-physical ecosystem collapses.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if your signal refutation engine can process global threat intelligence in a millisecond. If the human architect is too burned out by administrative HR forms to authorize the next engineering sprint, the mesh tax threatened to exceed the force index baseline.
That is deeply relatable. The machine is perfect, a literal Ferrari, but the driver is starving and stuck on hold with an insurance company. So how do they fix this? Looking at the roadmap for their next iteration, the T2 launch, what is the strategy to pay down this mesh tax?
The absolute top priority for the T2 launch is the protection of RA, the operator's metabolic capacity. Everything else is secondary to protecting the human's energy.
So what does this all mean for the listener? How do you actually protect human energy in a system that is this incredibly complex?
You prove that the automation is working, irrefutably, so that external stakeholders stop bothering the human for manual updates. To do this, they are deploying Looker Studio dashboards connected directly to what they call the Intelligence Ledger V2.
And this dashboard isn't for the AI.
No, this is for the human stakeholders and executives. It mathematically proves to them, in real time, that infrastructure debt is being driven to absolute zero. When stakeholders can see the math themselves, they trust the system, and they stop generating manual reporting friction for the operator.
So transparency buys the human architect peace and quiet. And the final improvement strategy in the AAR is operationalizing their marketing 5.0 pipeline, which sounds like typical corporate speak, but in this context, it's about turning that AI directorate into a primary value driver.
Yes.
They want the system to automatically syndicate that sanitized internal intelligence into market-ready intellectual property, that sovereign capital we talked about earlier. If the machine can automatically monetize the intelligence it gathers, it pays for the human's biological maintenance and corporate overhead.
Precisely. It builds a self-sustaining financial moat around the operator, shielding them from external bureaucratic friction.
It is an incredible 14-day journey. To summarize, we are looking at an enterprise that successfully transitioned from a manual break-fix tinkerer, sweeping the messy garage every day, into an epistemically agentic enterprise. It's now governed by an AI board of directors, strictly enforced by mathematical baselines like the force index, and protected by deductive logic that hunts for the single lie rather than wasting time verifying the whole truth.
And that leaves us with a fascinating and somewhat provocative final thought to consider. The entire goal of this T2 transition, the entire reason for building this massive AI infrastructure, is to preserve the human operator's cognitive bandwidth strictly for architectural innovation.
Right, getting the human entirely out of the manual labor loop so they can just think.
Exactly. But if the AI directorate eventually perfects the execution of the enterprise, and this mesh tax, the HR paperwork, the maintenance, the biological friction, is genuinely reduced to absolute zero, what is the upper limit of human innovation when you are completely freed from the friction of daily operational survival? Does the human mind fundamentally change how it perceives work or even creativity when its only job is pure frictionless strategy?
Wow. If you never have to sweep the garage again, what kind of machine do you eventually build inside it? That is something to sit with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the architecture of your own daily workflows and protect your metabolic capacity. We will catch you on the next one.